guitar nerds? We're welcoming Dave Rubin again because Dave Rubin has come up with a kind of new yet old book, a new take on an old book, a series of books called The Complete Book of Electric Blues Guitar. And this is from Hal Leonard Publications. And hi, Dave. Thanks for being
All
here.
right.
Thanks for being here.
Pleasure.
What is it? Let's talk a little bit about the history of this book because it's arranged in a really cool little way. They're kind of like pieces of things that you've done over the last 30 years.
As they are, they weren't literally done one after another, but they were done in a sequence that is presented in this book, this compilation.
Mm-hmm.
It was suggested that we see if we could combine the 5 books into one, because they tell a story from the 40s to the. And as I looked at them again, I saw, well, it is sort of chronological. Sort of does go to the earliest electric blues post-war, electric blues with Tbone, and then it kind of develops into rhythm and blues, swing, shuffle, jump blues era, which I would call art of the shuffle. Louis Jordan, that's kind of like later 40s. And then Birth of the Groove, which groove I'm talking about beyond blues, I'm talking about rhythm and blues.
Yes.
And then soul music, and then and funk even, and that kind of thing. The power trio blues guitar is kind of moving a little more modern, a little bit where the rock influences come in, and the other way too, the blues into rock, and rock actually back into blues later on, and ending up with rock in the blues, which is blues rock.
Yeah, which it was everything in the 70s.
Yeah.
In the 60s, 70s.
Yeah, I mean, there's overlap here chronologically, but we saw that you could sort of do that if I rewrote sections of the book, which I did. I had to rewrite every intro to the book a little differently so that one went to the other.
Yeah.
And we took out some of the artists that were duplicated. For instance, B.B. King was in several of the books.
Yes.
And others, even Eric Clapton is in several of the books too. And make it have a narrative. We try to make it have a narrative, which I think, looking at it now, I think it certainly tries to achieve that. And examples, 130 some musical examples for everybody all the way through the book.
Yeah, that's wonderful. As I said, if any, I didn't know it was it's kind of like an omnibook of your the five was it five of previous books, but it tells the story in a complete form.
That's what the goal was, right?
Yeah. So when we talk about the electric blues, we're talking kind of like with this new inventions like the electric guitar. We're dating this around 1938-ish.
Yes. First commercial one anyway, successful commercial one. That's a whole story about the electric guitar. Actually goes back a little earlier. But yes, Gibson's, the ES 150, the Charlie Christian model.
Right? Yeah, and it's was that what they called it? What did they call it when it came out? It's Charlie Christian.
Well, that ES stands for Electric Spanish, which is sort of charming, I think, because Gibson still calls those hollow guitars ES. And it stands for Electric Spanish. I mean, it's 2021 and we're calling them Spanish guitars yet. I sort of like that myself. I like the history of it. But it was just the ES 150, I think, for the longest time, Gibson's numbers were what the guitars cost at the time. It cost $150. It's a lot of money in 1938, by the way.
Yeah.
And an amp that goes with it.
Okay.
Same amp that went with it.
And it created a sound that this guy was playing the guitar like he was Lester Young. I remember that's what people were saying about Charlie Christian, and those of you don't know, Charlie Christian, whether you like jazz or not, he is an important figure on the electric guitar. Without that big boom, that was like later on the Kinks and power chords. You know what I mean? Charlie Christian was at in 1938 for a very brief period because
Yeah,
he didn't live.
not very long.
Yeah, it was like tuberculosis
Yeah, 3 years maybe,
and
4 years.
he was friends with as you had mentioned, Tbone Walker.
Yes,
Apparently, and this is what I'm finding out from you. They studied with the same guy.
they did.
I didn't know they studied with anybody.
They did. I know. You don't think of it back in those days, right?
Yeah.
You don't think of them
I
actually
wonder what it
studying.
was like back then. I wonder what he was like, the teacher.
I've read a lot of biographies of T-Bone and Christian, and they don't seem to mention it. Maybe I've missed it. I don't see talking about him. There was only the name.
What was the guy's name?
Dick Richardson, Cliff Richardson.
Okay.
Sorry, I should know that on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah.
You might check that. Richard maybe, but it was in a local city. These guys are from the Southwest, and T-Bone from Texas, of course, and but that's close to Oklahoma, obviously.
Mhm.
And they ended up, they would have been, I guess, the same age too. I mean, again, T-Bone lasted until the mid 70s or 76, I think.
Mhm.
But Christian, I don't know what, 1941, 1940. I mean, he died. I mean, he was really young. He was not around a long time.
Yeah.
The Benny Goodman years, and then a little bit after that.
It's kind of like the Jimi Hendrix story.
It is like that.
Yeah.
It is like that.
So how important was Tbone Walker to your book? Like when I say this, the lineage of electric blues guitar. How important was Tbone Walker?
I still find it amazing, Rod, to listen to him, and I've done a lot of listening, even recently again. If I can give a plug for another book called Play Like Tbone Walker that I did last year, and then I did a Play Like Charlie Christian this year, which was nice. So I had to do a lot of listening again. You're asking about Tbone, and I am never failed to be amazed by the sophistication that he had virtually immediately, with no one really before him. I mean, we could get off on that, on who played the first electric guitar solos.
Yes.
That's a topic for another time and another book, right. Not this discussion. But your question is how important it is to see how quickly he grasped what he had. Yeah. That this was just not a louder acoustic guitar. Yes. This was a different instrument.
This is a different paintbrush.
Different.
So he created a completely different, because there were jazz guitar soloists before Charlie Christian. Before Charlie Christian.
There were.
And there was obviously there blues guitar players, the Bottleneck Blues and before Lonnie, was it Lonnie Johnson?
Oh, Lonnie Johnson, great. Yeah, Johnson, Robert Johnson, of course, and all that. Yeah. Correct.
But the invention of the electric guitar, Tbone, and I'm going to go down to say, and because I Googled this actually, who was the first person to bend notes on the electric guitar, and Google says it's B.B. King. And I think B.B.
Well, no.
Yeah. it was Tbone.
Well,
yeah.
No. They say that on the electric guitar?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Tbone.
Yeah.
Yeah, clearly.
If somebody did it before him, we don't know about it because we don't know.
No, we don't know.
But he's the guy that threw it out there that everybody copied.
He made it a part of the language, like you say, the paintbrush. It's one of the colors, and his paint was the string bending.
Yes.
And BB did more. Correct.
Yes.
You're talking, at least till BB hits his stride. Another 10 years later.
Yeah. Yeah. So we talk about jump blues, because did Tbone consider himself a blues player or a jump blues? Because a lot of people don't know what jump blues is. So what are we defining as jump blues? That's at the core of what Tbone was in the early days.
Well, a little later, like jump blues really precedes rock and roll. I mean, in fact, there's a fine line there. I mean, like Big Joe Turner and Shake, Rattle, and Roll,
Mhm.
and that kind of thing. And even Bill Haley comes out of that kind of jump blues. This is where, and maybe the source of it, and you can't just say one person, but Louis Jordan
Yes.
with Caledonia and Boogie and all those songs, pardon me, that he did, often with humorous lyrics, where we're really talking about breaking it down to almost literally just three chords, a 1-4-5, and that's that driving shuffle beat, and people could dance to it.
Yes.
People like to
So
dance.
it's kind of like
dancing blues.
Yeah. So swing kind of like divided.
Yeah.
The swing movement kind of divided when swing kind of was running its course. You had guys that went on to like the bebop side.
Right.
But the bebop side, they didn't want anybody to dance to their stuff.
No, they didn't.
Yeah.
To their detriment, unfortunately, commercially, I would say, not aesthetically, but commercially, yes, to their detriment. Yeah.
Yeah. But jump blues was the opposite, where they just took the rhythm section, a couple horn players, and a soloist. So in Tbone Walker's jump blues, he was the soloist a lot of the time.
Yes.
So he's coming from kind of a swingish background. And as a lot of you listen to B.B. King, a lot of his the first 20 years is kind of jump bluesish.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The early songs definitely are.
Yeah.
Definitely are. They're up tempo, medium tempo, and have a very steady groove, often shuffles, and people could dance to them.
Yeah.
And they did.
Yes. Yep.
And boy, then and then it's that fine line, Rod, of where does that become rock and roll? That's books have been written.
So where jump blues goes into rhythm and blues, they had this thing called rhythm and blues.
Yes, you do. That comes.
If you listen to things that were called rhythm and blues in jump blues, they sound the same.
Yeah. Yes, they do.
So it's like a marketing thing more than anything else.
Yeah, they're just terms. They're just semantic.
Yeah.
But we need them so we can talk about it.
Well, the other part of this is like race records. Race records, I think what the guy was it Jerry Wexler that termed rhythm and blues?
Jerry Wexler, very good.
So rhythm and blues, he did it because of, I think what he said was probably twofold. The racism. He was kind of a race warrior.
Yes, he was.
And the other part is he's a businessman. He saw that this music can be marketed to a wider audience than just the black folk or whatever.
Yeah. Well said.
Yep. Well, so the art of the shuffle, that is all about the kind of the jump blues.
Yeah, and boogie woogie. We put that. All these things coalesce to form rock and roll, of course. Boogie woogie for sure. And that's, you often had those walking boogie woogie bass lines. You have them in T-Bone songs too. T-Bone Shuffle and some other. He did some instrumentals too, although he was a great singer. So you have that boogie woogie thing happening in there too. And there was a boogie woogie craze just before the World War II. We're to digress a bit here with the piano players.
Yeah.
And so I'm talking about that. I happen to love boogie woogie, and
the piano craze too. Yeah, as you said, piano.
Yeah, absolutely. People loved that in World War II, and everybody was doing. The Andrews Sisters, Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy that Bette Midler did. That's boogie woogie. There's a walking bass line in there. That was a big hit. People love that. So that comes in there too, and that's in T-Bone's music, and that stays all the way through. And then you get to Rocket 88, which people like to point to as the first rock and roll song.
Mike Turner.
It's not the first rock and roll song. It's a great record though.
Yeah.
On its own.
Yeah.
It's not it's clearly not the first.
Was it the first? Was that the first record that had distortion on it purposely?
It was the first record that had distortion on it purposely.
Was it the first record that had distortion on it purposely? Was it the first record that had distortion on it purposely? Was it the first record that had distortion on it purposely? Was it the first record that had distortion on it purposely?
to that degree. I mean, Tbone sometimes pushed it, and Christian, for a jazz guy, pushed his little amplifier a little bit into distortion.
Okay.
But that's almost fuzz tone. You know, it's what we would call fuzz tone.
Yeah. But what happened there was the amp fell off the truck and it was a torn.
Correct.
So like what Ike Turner's genius was, or I don't know if it was Ike Turner's.
It is Turner.
Or was it Sam Phillips? Whoever's genius it was let's make this the sound of the record.
Yeah. Sam Phillips should gets credit there too. Yeah. They realize, again, you brought up a great point that I make whenever I can about this music, and also let's take it to right where it is. All this music we're talking about originally is the glorious achievement of the African American community.
Yes, it is.
And the early African American guitar players, electric guitar players, they figured that out first.
Yeah.
Oh, look what happens when you turn the amp up.
Yeah.
Wow, I sound like a saxophone player, and I can compete with the saxophone for solo space.
It doesn't have to sound like a bell.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. We like that rough sound.
Yeah.
You know, I'm paraphrasing here, but
yeah.
So that happened there. There's the result of that when you get to Rocket 88, which again certainly is on the cusp of what we would call, you know, the beginnings of rock and roll anyway, where you would recognize the term. But I think that's an important point, and it goes back to what you said about Tbone. He recognized he had a different instrument here. Yeah. And as it went along, and more players from the blues, most were black, and even in jazz, not totally in jazz, saw the same thing, that all those years they had to just play rhythm behind the horn players, like, you know, Freddie Green in Count Basie's band, although that seemed to be his choice, by the way, because he always played acoustic guitar. I
heard like in the 47 or however many years, I'm making numbers up now, that he was with Count Basie.
Yes.
He had one guitar solo.
Yeah. I mean,
by choice.
He didn't by choice. He didn't want
by
to.
choice.
He played that L5, that beautiful L5, and all those years. But there are other players. And in fact, Charlie Christian has a famous quote. He was in Downbeat, I think, or what if Downbeat was a magazine. You know, guitar players be heard. Play electric guitar. I'm paraphrasing here. They understood it, that this was a way now that they could solo and be heard over the horn sections. And as they went along, they find the more you turned up the amp, the even better you could be heard. The guitar sustained, you could do more expressive things with it that you could not do on an acoustic guitar. And that's where that kind of all begins. It again takes us back to, it all goes back to Tbone, which is what you were kind of saying.
Yeah.
Too.
So from the art of the shuffle, we have Bur For The Groove. And when you say groove, you're tracing the groove back to rhythm and blues.
And then eventually soul music.
Soul music, yeah.
You know, like that far forward with soul music. So I have guitar players in there, like, you know, Curtis Mayfield I have in. But I like Turner in there, by the way, too. Because they were early with the Tina, you know, they were doing that kind of music.
So did you you're teaching people about Curtis Mayfield's tuning, special tuning?
Well, I mentioned it. But as I've done, and people can have a different opinion on this, sometimes when I countered that kind of thing with tunings, Rod, I felt it easier to teach, at least to get people started, by playing them in standard, which you can do on the Curtis Mayfield songs.
Yes.
He literally, to talk about being, you know, self-taught, he tuned to the black keys on the piano. Which is F sharp. And he always did. And I remember seeing him on TV, the first time I saw him on TV, which is a while ago. And I've been a fan. I've been listening to music. Of course, I had no idea where he came from or what he was doing with the guitar. So I'm watching him, and it doesn't make sense to me where his fingers
His
are going.
fingers are what sound is coming out.
Because I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. But yes. So my examples for Curtis Mayfield are in standard tuning.
Okay. Which is wonderful anyway, because those of our listeners, we love guitar nerds. Curtis Mayfield, he was in the Impressions. He had obviously had a solo career, but his guitar playing, I think, like some of the stuff I love most about Jimi Hendrix's playing is when he tries to sound like Curtis Mayfield.
Well said.
Yeah, and he took it. He took it elsewhere too.
Did.
Yeah, but it's like the original concept of a lot of his "Wing Cries Mary, Little Wing." That's all vibing Curtis Mayfield. Yeah,
absolutely. You know, that chord melody, if you will, where clicks are coming out of the chords rather than scales. I mean, there's scale not there, but coming out of chords where you know, you get that really full rhythm that's sort of in between sometimes, because it can be solo and it could be backup. And I've pointed out, I think, in that book, The Birth of the Groove, that what happened when those rhythm and blues bands went out on the road, where they were used to having keyboard players in the studio.
Yeah.
When they went out on the road, and sometimes even organs, like Hammond organs, right? They didn't have it. They either couldn't take the piano with them, it was too much to carry around, or the ones that were there were not in tune or whatever. Now it falls on the guitar player. Listen, pal, you got to do more than just strum chords and play solos. You've got to fill in what the keyboard player would be doing, and that kind of playing sort of develops. I mean, it's jazz players were doing it before then, but I'm talking about rhythm and blues.
Yeah. Do we know who Curtis Mayfield was inspired by? Was it the church? Is that what it was? Like what you're saying about that?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't recall specific players.
Yeah. But the idea of being thrown into the situation, it's kind of like the Larry Graham story.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point.
Yeah. It's like you're just being thrown into it, and you're trying to create what is needed, but not present.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So
exactly.
The other thing is that electric bass versus acoustic bass, that has a similar story, because the acoustic bass player was the guy that traveled alone because of his instrument was so big.
Right.
To keep costs down, they gave him electric bass, and he finds out that I can be heard more.
Right.
That changed the style. That changed the sound of the Chicago blues, the Texas blues.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yep. So Birth of the Groove, into the power trio blues. When we say power trio, who are the power trios you're referring to?
Well, I'm talking about the blues players, where we would think as in the rock era, we might think of you mentioned Hendrix. There's the trio, right? Cream.
Yep. Okay.
Top of the list, or near the top of the list. But
even a Jeff Beck group.
Yeah.
They had a keyboard player, but and a vocalist. But at the core of it was Ronnie Wood, Jeff Beck, and that drummer guy.
So we're talking about the three. Yeah, that's right. We're talking about the three instrumentalists, and maybe a singer runner. I mean, Led Zeppelin too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, all the groups which are four musicians and one is a singer. So I'm talking about but we're talking about blues here. So we're talking about the blues player. So this is what's referred to as, and here's where the chronology starts to work for me in these books, is what's called the west side of Chicago blues sound, as opposed to the south side.
Okay.
Simplifying here. South side, Muddy and Howlin' Wolf.
Okay.
West side, Otis Rush, Magic Sam, Buddy Guy.
Okay.
They often played certainly live, maybe not in the studio. They often played, sometimes for economic purposes of not needing more musicians that have to be paid and keep a big band together. They often played in trios. Now, of course, all three of them sang, so they really are a trio. So I'm using that as the basis. Those three particularly, and those three were really influenced by B.B. King, where Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf, those guys are from the pre-war era in their lives.
Yeah.
They're from the Delta Blues era.
Yeah.
But these guys who are like the next generation.
I heard that Buddy Guy, and this is an interesting, I don't even know, it might be myth, but Buddy Guy left the farm, moved to Chicago because he wanted to see how Muddy Waters squeezed the strings.
You're right.
Is that am I accurate? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Which is funny to think, because now we live in an age that if you want to check out how to bend a string, we can go on YouTube. But back then, we had to make a pilgrimage.
Yeah. If you wanted to see it,
You had to make a pilgrimage to another city, and he respected Muddy among others, but Muddy so much that how's he doing that? And he's got to get that thing down. And it's like you don't have books like you're writing back in 19.
No, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true. Very true.
So Buddy Guy, I didn't know if that was true or not.
It may be somewhat apocryphal, but I'll buy it.
Yeah,
I'll buy it. I've heard that as well.
Yeah.
I think you're making the point that he did have to go. He revered Muddy, and Muddy took him under his wing,
Yeah.
by the way, and helped him out and helped him get started.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true. And again, Muddy, who is in the book, obviously,
Yeah.
in the first, he's in the first one of the five that's combined there.
Yeah.
Not a virtuoso in the style of B.B. King, and even the people who played in his band, Pat Hare, and some others. My friend and co-author Bob Margolin played with him in the 70s. No, he wasn't that, and also he tended to focus more on playing slide than single note. After he got his bands together, he did not, rarely if ever, Bob would know this better than me, play single note solos, but he did play slide, and he was ferocious on
Well, he
slide.
started off, his first recordings were Delta Blues.
Yes, they were acoustic in the 40s, right?
Yeah.
Yes, they were. And this is a good time. I know we're moving into Power Trio Blues, but to go back for a minute, again, how important it was that these early players, most of whom, almost all, were Black players, understood the power of electricity. So Muddy comes to Chicago, and he's actually playing in the jump blues and swing blues, because that's what's popular, Tbone style. He's actually playing Tbone style, and there's record recordings of him. You're amazed to hear it, because you don't expect Muddy Waters to sound like Tbone. Now, he's not on the par of Tbone, but he's in the style. And a bit of a story here. At Chess Records, it's not really selling. They want to do something else, and they really want him to try to sound more like what he used to sound like. He thinks that's old-fashioned, the Delta blues. But anyway, really paraphrasing here, they pull that together, and he plays electric, and he takes what he had played in the Delta and electrifies it. Can't Be Satisfied, 1948. And it's like Chess plays it through a speaker outside their offices in Chicago, and the people walking by in the street are dancing to it. People who remembered it when they were children, when they were growing up in the South before they emigrated to Chicago.
Yeah.
Again, but it's that knowledge of, or the prescience to say, oh, wait a minute. What I used to play here on acoustic guitar, now I'm playing on, like, this is a whole other thing. It's more powerful. It's more forceful. People love it. Bingo.
Yeah.
That's the start of it all. Yeah.
His story is long, Muddy Waters, because he goes in and out of being a professional musician. And I was at the Rolling Stones and went to Chess Records, and Muddy Waters was the janitor there.
He was Now, I'm glad you brought that up. Keith swears by that story, by the way.
Okay.
Not personally, but Keith swears by that story. But I got to interview Marshall Chest, the son, one time on the phone.
Yeah.
The first thing I asked him, I said, "Is that really true?" When the Rolling Stones
That's apocryphal.
Yeah. I said, "Was Money painting?" He said, "I know Keith tells that story all the time." And he swears to it. He says, "No, that's not true." He said he wasn't selling records at the time. That is true. And we may have had him doing some things around the office because he was not playing. His music was not happening in the mid 60s, early mid 60s, when the Stones went there to record. He said, so that part's true. But no, he wasn't standing on a stepladder painting the ceiling. He said, but he said, and he laughed. Marshall laughed. He said, but he said, every time I see Keith, we laugh about it. He swears that it happened.
Okay, yeah.
That it didn't.
Yeah. Well, who knows?
but your point was about his who knows.
Yeah.
Marshall wasn't telling the truth.
Well, maybe Marshall didn't know.
Maybe he was very young at the time. Maybe he didn't know. He was a kid at the time. This is true.
Yeah.
But your point was about his career going in and out.
Yeah.
That did happen because his style, which was more related to, was South Side and was more related to the pre-war blues. Not that we anything wrong with that, but the styles had changed, and people wanted to hear something a little more modern, like the West Side guys were playing.
So the South Side they were the Delta blues made electric.
Yes. And the West Side was sort of like picking up BB's example, and making that their own, and then making their own music with that, like Buddy Guy. Yeah.
Okay, now let's take this to all of these players. Actually, I'm not even going to ask that yet. So let's have a brief discussion on Texas blues.
Okay.
What differentiates Texas blues from Chicago blues?
Generalizing a little bit, Rod, I would say, because that's the Southwest. Now we're in that T-bone, but also the jazz territory and the swing era, where a lot of those bands developed and played. And the Texas blues tends to, at least early on, have a little more of that swing kind of feel. If I can, I'm just going to do this here a little bit. Let's say this. I'm really simplifying here. Let's say that. Let's say that's the Chicago. It's really simplifying, and the Texas is
kind of like the Charleston.
Right, but we call it Charleston. More that kind of rhythm and more of that kind of swing. I'm simplifying because there's overlap both ways. But if you're asking for a difference, when I think of it, I think of that. And then you have, because everything was like cross fertilizing here too. So Freddie King, one of my main idols, was from Texas.
Yes.
But he but he made the early recordings are in Cincinnati, and then he's in Chicago. So he's picking up things everywhere. So he doesn't really sound so much like that I was playing. Freddie, he's more of a mixture.
Well, when you listen to Albert Collins, his backup band, it was not just feeling sorry for yourself. It was not just janka 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 janka. He wasn't that. His guys had, like, early on, probably a really big swing component to their style.
Yes. Well, he did more like that.
Yes.
Cal did more like that too. He liked to play. He loved the organ bands, and he played with organists.
Yeah. And then later on, he would appropriate like the R&B and funk and anything. Yeah. His stuff was like church.
That's
Sounds like
right. Good
I think
point.
I didn't differentiating like we talk, Freddie King and Albert Collins. Uh, what about where does Albert King fit in with all this?
I know this. It's again, we need to use these terms, Rod, to describe her. We can't have a conversation about the music.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a St. Louis guy, so you have all these areas of the country where blues had a real strong base.
Mhm.
And St. Louis is one of them. Obviously, Chicago was. Excuse me. Cities in Texas. And Tbone made his mark really as a recording artist in Los Angeles. So, you don't think of Los Angeles as a center of blues, but that's really true. So he's got that St. Louis thing. He comes out of, I don't think he liked to really give credit too much to who he listened to. Like, kind of a Albert King, that's a whole other story. I only saw him once. It was a great experience, though. I think out of kind of where everybody else did. I mean, he started recording in the 50s, and "Don't Throw Your Love on Me So Strong" was one of his big hits from that period. I mean, it's kind of standard slow blues. He certainly wasn't playing that boogie bass shuffle kind of thing. A little more of a swing, I would say, until he goes to Stax Records in the 60s. And then, you know what happens then, Born Under a Bad Sign.
Yeah.
And everything changes. And he goes into...
That's kind of where was it a career boost once he hit Stax? Yeah, in other words, he was discovered late in life, really.
He was. Good point.
Yeah. And he borrowed from everything too, but it's like the Born Under the Bad Sign era, and then he did some funky things.
He did.
And so
he did.
So now let's go to the British invasion. Let's switch over to the British invasion. What are your thoughts on Eric Clapton? And when I say this, it is my thought that the importance of Eric Clapton is not that he can play licks. It's the fact that he borrowed from all the people that we're talking about who we had discarded. We kind of discarded, like B.B. King was not at the top of his career. He was probably better than most, a lot of them.
Yeah, he always seemed to work.
These were the years that whether it's true or not, stories come out that Muddy Waters is painting ceilings.
Yes.
Okay. All those guys, they were having a tough time of it because in America at that time, we weren't appreciating that.
We weren't.
It came and went. So Clapton and John Mayall, when he was with John Mayall, he was listening to all these albums that were all the stuff that you're talking about.
Yes.
In your book. All the stuff that in your book that you're talking about.
All of it.
Okay. For me, that is his big contribution because he brought that to a wider audience.
He did.
Okay.
He did. And helped B.B. King, particularly. They did become friends. They did make that record together.
Mm-hmm.
Bryden was the king. I've had that great honor of interviewing B.B. several times, and he always gave credit. Clapton's name would come up. He always gave him credit of helping to promote him and to take his music through Clapton's playing B.B.'s music through Clapton to a wider audience.
Mm-hmm.
And he always acknowledged that. And I think, and that may be ultimately his legacy. Pardon me.
Eric Clapton.
You see that he did that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is like a lot of people, because not everyone's a fan of Clapton's as a player, but I think you're missing the point. What he did is he reshaped. In other words, he borrowed from who he was in love with sound wise. this inspired him, and he brought that to, as I said, that was his big, like a connector of musical styles. He brought
Yeah.
it out, and then all of a sudden, all these people rose up, and they had careers, and their efforts were being recognized, and so yes, so then you have the rock and the blues, which when you say rock and the blues, you're talking about how the blues. There is no rock and roll without the blues. That's like the real and a gumbo.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No one can argue that, right?
Yeah.
If they do, I'll have a fight with them. So
Yeah. So that was the last of the of in your book. So you
right.
want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So there I'm talking about. So the British guys very prominently kind of sort of went in a bit chronological order for that era, even what I'll call that era. So I'm talking about Clapton, Peter Green. We can have a whole discussion about Peter Green, maybe for another time.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about him in more depth. Keith too. Keith Richards, obviously, all the way to Alvin Lee. I have in that part of the book, Leslie West, even Robbie Robertson, who really maybe, I hate to say pure, but certainly started out and maybe kind of still is more of a blues guitar player than a rock player.
I think he is completely underrated.
I agree.
When you see the last waltz, and he's going head to head with Clapton, he's hanging there. He's no slouch. Nobody
hanging there. I can tell you.
There's nobody's gonna the best him.
No, it's not. It's like
we don't talk about him. We don't talk about him in the same light.
Well, if you think about the band songs, which are wonderful songs, mostly, thanks to his writing and arranging, rarely did he take a solo.
Yeah.
I mean, he takes a few.
Yeah.
And they're beauties. They're short. They're to the point. They're great, but they're rare. He wrote the songs, and Levon, not the only one who sang them, because Manuel and Danko sang too. But rarely took a solo. That was really an amazing thing to see him in the last waltz. Because I saw the band live in 1970 in Philadelphia. He didn't take many solos then either. But seeing that further up the road with Clapton, it was like,
good Lord,
wait a minute. And here's a good chance if I can add in the rock and the blues thing too. Roy Buchanan, who Robbie learned from when Roy Buchanan went to Canada, when Robbie was in the Hawks with Ronnie Hawkins, and learned a lot from Buchanan. And again, one of my all-time idols, Roy Buchanan, for sure.
I'm just now rediscovering him, and how he is different than so many of the others. He's not like he's got some finger style.
He does.
Weirdness is there that I love, that I never, the first time around, I never got. But I think it's YouTube, to be honest with you. I think it's YouTube that brings it out, because it's like live footage of him.
Yeah, that's true.
So folks, Roy Buchanan, check him out. He was like,
yeah, absolutely.
He was one of the ones I think the Stones, and this might be apocryphal again, but they wanted him after Mick Taylor left, I think.
I've heard that story.
He was on a short list.
He was. Yeah. I'm not sure he would have been a good fit in the Stones.
I agree.
But it's tantalizing to think of it.
Yeah. I also heard stories about Michael Schenker, which is completely weird.
Schenker.
Yeah.
Great player, but
not the Stones.
Not the Stones. I never heard that.
That is weird.
Wow, that kind of boggles the mind.
I can't even imagine what that would be like.
I can't imagine it either. I can't either.
So Rockin' the Blues, Mountain, Leslie West, Mountain,
Leslie West.
10 years after, obviously Hendrix.
Yep.
Um,
Right.
Obviously, probably Zeppelin.
Page is in there as well. Right?
Yep.
British guys. Yep.
The original Jeff Beck group.
I think pardon me for I don't have the book in front of me.
Yeah.
I'm forgetting some of the people that were in that last one.
Yeah.
Again, an idol for sure. Still one of the greatest, and still going strong, which is a wonderful thing. Yes, that original Beck with Rod Stewart. I mean, listen to that album, Truth.
Yeah.
I mean, after after the Yardbirds, wow, that's as good a blues as you're going to hear. I mean, that's just great blues playing. There's no question.
Yeah. So,
by the way, if I could tell, if we have time, Rod, a quick anecdote: B.B. King and Jeff Beck.
Go ahead.
Again, one of the many honors that I got to do with when I was writing for Guitar One magazine with the people that I got to meet was I did a interview. They were both here. B.B. King and Jeff Beck were here to do some kind of cable show on TV in New York. And I got to go and hear them rehearse and then interview them together in the same room at the same time, which Beck was hilarious, I have to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really great. But what I got to hear ties everything together. I got to hear them rehearse in an auditorium where there were only technicians there, and I begged the publicist to let me go in and hear this, because they weren't letting any journalists in.
Yeah.
I got to go in there, and it's nothing but technicians. There's nobody, empty auditorium. They're on the stage. BB plays first. He plays a couple of songs. He sits up there, and it was wonderful to hear him in that situation. I'd heard him many times, but this is different. He's not really playing for an audience.
Mm-hmm.
Not much of an audience, and they don't know that I'm there. He really got into playing, and then and it was beautiful. And then Beck comes out, and Beck's playing through a half stack, Marshall half stack, and BB's playing through that Lab series that he liked at some point, that Gibson Lab series.
Yeah.
I never quite understood that. They played two songs together. They played The Key to the Highway, and I'm trying to remember I can't remember the second song. But so they start to play, and BB lets Jeff solo first. So I'm watching Beck, and I'm trying to put myself in his head. What is Beck thinking right now? He's playing with BB King. Not even an audience there of any sort.
Mm-hmm.
What is he thinking? I'm going to guess. He's thinking, well, I want to play and do what I can do. I want to play well in front of BB King.
Yeah.
But I don't want a grandstand.
Yes.
I want to look like I'm showing him up.
Yeah.
So Beck plays, and he plays great. Straight blues.
Yeah.
But he's a little bit louder than BB was playing. And and I think he got BB's attention. Number one, by how well he was playing the blues. And number two, how much louder he was playing the blues. So now BB's going to solo after Jeff Beck. And I see BB reach for his volume knob. Yeah. He rolls his volume knob up on Lucille. Yeah. And BB, it was like, oh, okay. I see what we're doing here. Yeah. Not going to be any laying back and slacking on this. And BB played also great. He always did. Yeah. But he took that situation to another level. Uh-huh. The volume thing again. You know, he hears Beck playing. Okay, Beck's playing the Strat through a half stack, and I mean, he wasn't terribly loud, and he wasn't terribly distorted. He wasn't playing through any boxes. He was straight into the amp. Yeah. But he had a little bigger sound. He had a more distorted sound, and he had thing. And then now BB, when he turned, even with that Lab series amp, turned that Lucille up, he had the same thing. I kind of got a kick out of it.
A lot of we don't think of Jeff Beck and like, I guess The Jeff Beck group was a little more bluesy, but a lot of time where Jeff Beck went was kind of like space blues.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But his roots,
Right.
some of his roots, are the blues. He's
Very
got
much.
a variety. He's also a Les Paul kind of guy,
He was.
but make like contorting sound and all that kind of stuff.
Correct.
So another thing that we're going to talk a little bit about your what I appreciate about your writing is we're talking about power trios and we're talking about rock, rock and the blues, and there's always people in your books that I've never heard of before, but are influential, and without them, music would be different. So I that kind of writing, how important is history in your writing?
Well, I love it. I love it, Rod. And it means a lot to me because it's given me a deeper appreciation of music.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think, at least in some small ways, it's made me a better player by knowing it and by knowing these more obscure players and what they did. You can learn from everybody. And also, I kind of feel like, I'm fortunate to have this forum. I'm fortunate to have this forum today talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
This second time
we are fortunate for you.
Well, thank you.
It's always a good time.
Oh, thank you. Likewise.
Like mine.
I kind of feel an obligation, not to go too serious on this here, but a little bit of giving back. The music has meant so much to me, mm-hmm. personally and as a player, that I want to share it because I think others will too. And like yourself, Rod, many have. I think most from the feedback that I get from the readers and even on my Facebook page, people like that, what you said. They like if they've somebody they didn't know before, and wow, look how great this person is. This is really, really worth knowing. This has been getting a lot of enjoyment out of hearing something new. So it's really it's the sharing of it. I think that
yes,
I have the opportunity to do it. I've been giving that
mm-hmm.
that opportunity. It's part of what I feel I should be doing, but I also enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel it, not something.
That's your good work.
Thank you. In a small way, but thank you. Yes, I hope that it is.
I don't think it's educators. Yeah. So the complete book of electric blues guitar by Dave Rubin. You can purchase it. It's a Hal Leonard Company. Like everybody knows.
Or Amazon.
Amazon.
Even, yeah.
Amazon. I am purchasing it.
Well, how about this? How about if I send you one?
That would be wonderful. That would be absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, you give me your address. I don't have your address. I'll send you one. Oh, absolutely, Rod. For all you've done. And I have copies anyway. I'll send you one.
Alrighty. That is wonderful. And this is always a treat whenever we're able to talk. And future, more of this.
Yeah.
The meeting of the minds.
Yeah, well,
I always learn from you.
Well, and from you, and I from you, because you're very perceptive and have done your homework too, and you have an appreciation of the same things that I do. So it's always a conversation, Rod.
Yes.
It's always a conversation of peers, and I enjoy that.
Yes. Thank you so much. And be well.
You too.
Safe in this. Currently, I'm looking out the window and it's flooding, so I'm thinking Texas flood. So hopefully you're safe.
We didn't talk about Stevie Ray, but another time. There's so much to talk about. We really needed to talk about
again the complete book of electric blues guitar by Dave Rubin. Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure.
Thanks.
I will see you then.
Yes. Take care.
Bye.